We have breaking news that Matt Gaetz' accomplice, Joel Greenberg, is officially going to plead guilty. And this is devastating and worrisome news for Matt Gaetz. Look at this headline from the Washington Post. They literally say he's pleading guilty, and this is worrisome for the congressman. And there's so many reasons why this is the case. You plead guilty when you know that you're guilty. And what Joel Greenberg has said all along is that all of the evil things I did, my pal, my buddy, Matt Gaetz, was right by my side. We were chumming it up while we did awful things to all of these people, all of these young women, including somebody that was not yet 18. We did it together. And so obviously you're roped up in this, but crucially, one of the conditions earlier on in this was that he was getting this potential plea deal because he was cooperating with the Department of Justice. And it was next week where they had a deadline to actually reach the deal. If they didn't, Joel Greenberg would have found himself totally without any protection and facing a full penalty, facing potentially a court case where he could be found guilty and face full sentencing. And so him reaching this deal now means something was achieved. He got this deal because the cooperation he offered to the DOJ was sufficient. What he gave them, he held up his end of the bargain. Joel Greenberg might be a scumbag, but the DOJ worked with him. He gave them information. He gave them witness testimony. He gave them context. And they said, okay, fine, Mr. Greenberg, you can have your plea. And so next Monday, he's scheduled to formally enter that plea. And I think this is crucial because the next step is to go after Gaetz. We don't have the details of what that's going to look like, how fast that's going to happen, what charges Gaetz will face, but they will likely be significant. And again, they wanted to kind of lock up the small fish, get him entered in a plea, get all the information, sort of send him off to prison, send him off with his penalties, and then move on to Matt Gaetz. And they needed Greenberg, because again, throughout all of this, there was a lot of evidence on Gaetz. I don't want to suggest that there's no evidence, but the real juicy stuff was all connected to Greenberg. Greenberg introduced Gaetz to these young women, or in some cases, these girls. Gaetz was introduced to this lifestyle in some ways by Greenberg. Greenberg was there in the Bahamas. Greenberg was there with the Venmo transactions. Remember, Gaetz often didn't directly exchange money with the women. Gaetz would send money to Greenberg, who would send it to the women. And we can't forget the biggest piece of all potentially, which is that Joel Greenberg tried to buy a pardon from Roger Stone through Donald Trump. He tried to pay $250,000 to get Trump to pardon him and wrote a confession letter saying that among everything else, he and Gaetz together did these awful things, including to Vintage 99, the minor. This is big trouble for Gaetz. Massive trouble. We don't know how fast this is going to happen. It still might take some time, but this really was the first massive domino that needed to fall before we could see Matt Gaetz not only expelled from Congress, not only with his career over, but locked away in prison for life. And my goodness, Matt, you deserve it.